Okay, so we have another episode of Female Founders, and this time it is featuring Maggie. So, Female Founders brought to you by McGill Students for you and women. So, Maggie, can you just briefly introduce yourself, your name, your study, and the name of your organization?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on today. It's such a pleasure. So my name is Maggie Larocque. I'm a third year McGill student entering into my fourth year already, which is so crazy. But essentially, I'm very active in both the Montreal and the Vancouver community. As you know, I am the co-chair of McGill Students for UN Women, and I also am the founder of the UpLift Canada Foundation here in Vancouver. I'm pretty much just continuing my studies and working towards law school in 2022. So just a brief introduction there.
That's amazing. So, on the series, this is the third installment, but so far we've discussed period poverty, proper representation and STEAM, and representation of Indigenous women and Indigenous youth. So, it only feels right to talk about environmentalism. So, how does your organization embody environmentalism?
So that's a great question. So essentially, the UpLift Canada Foundation is a registered youth-led nonprofit organization that upcycles donated clothing and directly relocates it to local shelters in your area. And so essentially, our main central thesis, if you will, is to uplift others in your community and make giving easy. And so that's really what we're focused on. We're primarily based in BC at the moment, but we'll be launching our Montreal branch come September 2021, which is really exciting. So with that being said, to answer your question, we are environmental on a lot of different levels, actually. And the longer we do it, this is our 4th month running, the longer we do it, the more I find these different facets of both kind of social justice aspects of it, but also the environmental side. And so essentially we support the circular economy, whereas we're not asking people to go buy new items. It's really donating used clothing to be upcycled and actively repurposed into a usable resource for those in need. And so that's the main aspect of it being environmental is the upcycling process. Our secondary upcycling process, besides cleaning, sorting, and dividing the clothing for each shelter, is to we give any clothing that's torn or unusable to this company called Transcontinental, which is based here in BC. And essentially if an item is completely unusable, they will break it down into a fabric to be reused for other items again. Or if there is still an item that is usable, they sell it to various developing countries at a low cost, so they can sell it in their countries for improving the economy, kind of thing. And so we're really concerned with the whole life cycle of the clothing, so nothing's ever hitting the landfill, which is what we're trying to avoid. So that's kind of the environmental side. I can definitely get more into that later if you want, but that's the gist of it.
That's amazing. That's so impressive. So basically, after doing some research, your organization's story emphasizes how it's youth led. So why was it so important to you to involve youth in your mission?
So our executive team is majority female. There's a lot of BIPOC representation, and we're all youth. And so I think that's something that right off the bat is pretty unique in a lot of organizations. You don't often see that. And I know definitely coming from I'm in gender studies, I'm in Indigenous studies, I'm in philosophy, those kind of aspects of representation were really important to me when kind of formulating this. I also happen to have just an amazing executive team, and I very much feel like they have founded this organization with me because I feel so supported by them. And so it kind of happened that way where it was youth run. We're not, as it says on our website too, we're inclusive, we're not discriminatory against people that aren't youth if they're wanting to volunteer, of course. But I think that especially with the youth climate crisis involvement that there's been, we have found that the primary interest that we've gotten is from youth. And so we also collaborate with a lot of different high schools around the Delta School District to donate clothing and facilitate those kind of drives. And so it kind of is convenient that it's youth, but it's also, we think, a great mentorship opportunity for a lot of young people as well. And since we are registered, we can write reference letters and kind of do that whole thing. And if we need to sign their volunteer slips for the school or anything. But yeah, so it's both been very like wonderful and like uplifting to include youth, but it's also, I think, been like a two-part inspiring thing because young people are so passionate about the environment and like so ready to get involved. And especially kind of how our system is set up. It happens the last Saturday of every month, drop-off day is the last Sunday of every month. And so it's very like, you really get to see the impact that you're making. And a quick example is in our first month, we collected over 3,000 pounds of clothing. It was so shocking. Like we could not, we were so understaffed. Like there was maybe like 5 volunteers and we were like, we have so much clothing here to sort. And it was so incredible. And then to see that the very next day to be given to all these different shelters around British Columbia and to see how like graciously accepted the items were and how like needed, it was really, I think you really feel that impact when you're like volunteering at UpLift. And so, yeah, that's a long-winded answer to your question about youth involvement.
What you're doing is so innovative. Like I've never heard of anything like it. And I think it's amazing that you're including, you're making sure that it's really inclusive, but also like youth are the core and they're the center of it. So just to take a few steps back, so it's very evident that you're really into environmentalism. So what influenced your decision to focus on upcycling in particular?
So it really felt like a natural kind of progression. So essentially how UpLift came to be was in about October of last year in 2020. It's a pandemic, things are still like wonky, and so a lot of uncertainty in the world at that time, absolutely. But pretty much like I was with my longtime boyfriend, True, and they were trying to get rid of one of their couches in their house. And it was like out on the street for so long. And I was like, listen, we need to go get rid of this couch because it has been here for weeks. And like, if I feel like if I don't take it, it's just going to be there forever. And so we went to the dump that was like in New Westminster, kind of our local waste management facility. I hadn't been at the dump since I was like a kid. And pretty much it was just such an environmentally disheartening place to visit. And I particularly remembered these like mountains and mountains of perfectly good clothing that were just piled like literal mountains, so much taller than me, especially jeans. There was just a lot of jeans. Even True, like my boyfriend, he picked up a pair of jeans. He's like, can I take these? And I was like, no, but this is a problem, And so like, it was just so shocking. I couldn't believe that this was happening in my own backyard because, learning about the fast fashion industry and how that can be really harmful for the environment was something that I had kind of learned a little bit about, but I always kind of would expect it not to happen here in Canada, especially like a 5-minute drive from my house. Like I couldn't believe that it was right here in my backyard. And so from that, especially seeing how prevalent clothing was like in our local landfill, like something had to be done. And so I started brainstorming solutions, and upcycling like was the most like supportive solution for helping the circular economy. And also like there's a lot of different issues with donating clothing to other organizations sometimes, in Tawasin, where I'm from, for example, a lot of people don't want to donate their clothing to our supports a pretty extreme Baptist church in our community, which a lot of people don't want to support. And so that's also why we're secular as an entity. Like we're really trying to make it like an easy and transparent place for people to give. And kind of another note on that too was just the fact that like people wanted to get rid of their clothing and people had a lot of things to consume. And so by us like making it really easy for people to give and like kind of going to people's doorsteps really to make the process as simple as possible, upcycling just seemed like the natural solution to this like massive issue.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned a little while ago about the pandemic and how it kind of all things came together, it all made sense for you and influenced kind of like the founding of your organization. But to speak more about the impact of COVID, what has been the impact of COVID on your operations? Is it a roadblock, or has it been a motivator to persist?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I would say when we first launched in January, it was a bit difficult to secure shelters that were accepting used clothing because of the COVID-19 restrictions. Some shelters in BC were a bit hesitant to receive that just because of like, sanitation issues. Um, but luckily we were able to find like actually like a good amount, like 8 shelters right from the beginning that were really willing to accept and like wanted to accept used clothing. And of course, like everything is pre-washed and we sort it. So it's just really easy for shelters to accept, especially considering how chronically underfunded and understaffed shelters are. I know each time I had volunteered at a shelter, it was always to help like sort their donations because people just kind of give like random big bags of things, specifically like 2 times a year, like Christmas time and spring cleanup, which while that's really, really helpful, it's something that it can not be used to its full potential, we found, which is actually why we have an intentional giving initiative where at the start of each month, we are communicating with the shelters and we secure a list of items that are needed most that month. And so we only accept those items and we make sure they're cleaned. We itemize them by like size and item and things like that. We put them in these little like kind of paper bags. So we're not using plastic, and we drop them off to the shelter the next day. So it's just like very easy for them to store. I'm forgetting what your question was. I'm so sorry. I'm like go on these tangents. What was
No, no,
it?
it was just no. You answered it. It was basically about COVID's implication on your operations.
Yeah.
So basically, it's been a motivator. That's great. So a follow up question has to do with your motto. So the Uplift Canada Foundation's motto to uplift people in your community, uplift persons in your community. So how does that resonate with your personal motto?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm such a scatterbrain. I change my motto like all the time, but our one of like that definitely uplifting others in your community massive motto for Uplift Canada. But I would say like our primary one is probably making giving easy because like so often, at least my experience and also from friends, like you'll want to give things and you want to do and like help be a supportive member of your community, but it's hard to find ways how. And also like students are really busy, everyone's really busy, people are working, and so that's not only why we're structured to like run our operations only like 2 times a month at
Mhm.
the end of the month on the weekends, but also that it makes it easy for both the givers and the receivers, where we are literally picking up from people's doorsteps and they don't have to worry about anything else from there. And so I'd say like definitely uplifting others in your community is almost like a byproduct of that. I think our primary motto would be making giving easy. Just essentially you have to make it easy for people to do the right thing. And from our experience we've gathered almost 5,000 pounds of clothing already, and it's not even April, and people have absolutely been responding to that mission. And we feel like it's, especially with our intentional giving initiative paired with making giving easy, we make it very convenient for people to donate their goods. Like it's really been running smoothly, we found, in both parties we've gotten really great responses from. So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
how that translates to my own life, I don't know. I would say like I really do change my like vibe every day, I swear. Like there's just so much going on in my brain.
Well, honestly, our environment is constantly changing, so we kind of have to switch up our priorities and what keeps us going. So that's understandable. So kind of moving on to questions that are specific to you. So I know that you balance a lot. You're prepping for law school, as you mentioned. You're trying to keep up with uni. You run clubs, and then now an organization. So is there ever a point where you say to yourself, okay, I need a pause, a mental reset, or do you just push through, keep going because of all the pressure that is on you and because of these responsibilities?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, and like definitely something that's important for us to talk about. Like, I think that this should be a really normal conversation for people to have, so you can prevent things like burnout. And definitely, I would say, like, I'm just starting in this journey. Like, I'm not an expert by any means. So what works for me might not work for other people. But I'd say, like, primary thing is do things that you love, do things that you like, at least, you know, because I'd say, like, I love my studies. I'm so passionate about what I am studying and get to write about all the time. I love running UN Women. It's such an empowering group of people. And same with Uplift. Like, it literally uplifts my spirits every month. I get to see, like, you really get to see that change that you're making, and because you're doing that hands-on work where you're receiving all the clothes, you see, oh my gosh, so many people want to help, and then you give them to the shelters and they're so graciously accepted. It feels like you feel better for it. So I'd say, like, yes, I'm definitely doing a lot right now. This has been the craziest semester ever. But I have never felt better too, because these are all things that I really want to do with my life and keep pursuing. And even like with law, I am hoping to go into the nonprofit sector, you know, to kind of bridge that gap, because a lot of lawyers don't really go there. And so, yeah, I would say one thing is just like what you're doing, like, care about it, because I feel like it can be harder when it's something that you might not be passionate about, or the finish line seems really far away. And then the secondary response would be, like, on a more practical note, I think to just be okay with not always completing everything on your to-do list every day, and just to have grace with yourself. If you're feeling overwhelmed, just take a day where you literally don't do anything, or you go on a walk, or you like go work out, or you just like lay in bed. Like, just, if like, listen to yourself and what your body's telling you, I think is really important. And just like, don't just push through. That's how it works for me. Like, if I just push through, like, I will burn out and I'll just like cry and I'll just be upset. And so lately, just listening to yourself, because you know yourself and your mind and your body best, and just like being gracious. But ultimately, like, if you love what you're doing, you're going to do it well, I think, you know. And so I hope that is a good
No,
answer for you
that
guys.
was amazing. And then something kind of along the lines of that, something I would like to know is, I know with social impact work, there's a lot of pressure to do good, because you know that there's a lot of people relying on you. You mentioned before, when you dropped off those clothing to the shelters, you saw their faces, you saw that you're making an impact. So you want to continue making the same impact and nothing less. So how do you ensure the pressure to do good doesn't diminish your passion to do good?
That's a really excellent question, Janae. Thank you. Okay, I'd say two-part response. First is like the structure of it. I've tried to set up Uplift in a way that it's very sustainable for us to maintain. One, by our intentional giving initiative, it kind of scales us down a little bit. And so it is like, shelters aren't expecting mass quantities as much. And so I think that that's easier and more sustainable for us to collect each month to like provide what is being expected. And so there's that. And then another structural part of it is that we have two members of our executive team that are specifically grant administrators, meaning that they apply for grants consistently. You know, we can run each month with under $100, which is really incredible. We've really tried to like be as low budget as possible so we can continue to grow and things like this. But I would say, like, to have that structure where we're constantly searching for grants in order to support more shelters and accept more clothing, to make a larger impact, and then to also scale to go to other locations across Canada. I think having that system in place and just really open communications and partnership with the shelters has been kind of comforting, in that the system is kind of in check and that people know what is to be expected. And so there's that side where people are relying on us, and hopefully this system that we have in place will continue working how it is. And if it doesn't, like, happy to pivot and adjust and just receive feedback from that. And then on a personal level, I would say I haven't quite reached that point yet where, because the last 4 months we have just been like, it's been so positive, and there really hasn't been a whole lot of like where we have fallen short yet. I'm sure that will come. But I would say just like similar things, like taking care of yourself and also knowing that like you're doing this for the right reasons, I think is really important also, especially solidarity, not charity. There's no hierarchy between us and the shelters. It's very much like a partnership situation. And so as much as, yes, it's me and my team doing these things, I feel like we're doing it together because everyone's so involved in the process and in the decision making. And so yeah, I hope that answers the question.
That was amazing. Well, that question actually concludes the questions I had for you. But if you would like, can you just shout out your Instagram, organization's Instagram, and then how people can get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if people want to follow me personally, I mean, I'm Maggie_Larocque on Instagram. But so for UpLift on Instagram, we're UpLift_Canada. And you can find us, it's our same handle on like LinkedIn and Facebook. I would say we're currently in the process of making a promotional video. We're going to have it on Instagram Reels, so check that out. Hopefully it'll make it just really easy, quick thing for people to understand kind of more about who we are, what we do. We are coming to Montreal September 2021, so get ready. We have our BC chapter heads here and ready to take over our BC sector, and we are very excited, and I'm very excited to launch our Montreal branch. I think it'll be really exciting, and there's a lot to be done all over. So yeah.
Thank you. Well, that concludes our interview. Thank you so much, Maggie.
Thank you so much.